Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to AtoZrunning. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the AtoZrunning podcast. I'm Andy.
With Zach.
And Zach has some news. Let's just start it off with some news.
Just going to start it off right there. So I do have some news because I have signed on with a new coach, which may seem a bit counterintuitive to some of you because we coach other athletes ourselves. But, you know, we've talked about this before. Like, everybody needs a coach, right? And I don't believe that coaching myself is the most effective way to do things, although I don't mind coaching myself at times. However, I have been on a quest, as some of you, and if not many of you at this point already know, I've been on a quest for years to try to really get at the heart of how to train best in any and all ways and capacities. And so we've been publishing some work on that with our Running Foundations series. If you didn't listen to it, go back. There are 3 parts to it. So look for the Running Foundations episodes. And what I've been trying to do is really get at the heart of training from every angle. And so one of the final straws for me was I would love to have been at some point coached by like the Arthur Lydiard, right? The legend and the one who has kind of inspired the majority of the work that most contemporary coaches do. Well, he's not alive anymore. And his foundation has a lot of like certified coaches, but that's not quite the same thing. And then my friend, Jed Christensen, shout out to Jed. Again, we shout out to Jed a lot here. Jed sent me a note out of the blue a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "Hey, I'm calling up Barry McGee to be my coach." And I thought to myself, that name sounds familiar. And sure enough, as I had thought it was as soon as he mentioned it, Barry McGee was one of the original stars that Arthur Lydiard coached back in the 60s.
Wow.
He was the 1960 Olympic bronze medalist in the marathon, Barry McGee. He's like 87 years old. So, you know, he's not a spring chicken anymore, but he still coaches. And he lives in New Zealand, and he coaches athletes all over the world.
And he's great at email.
And he's great at email. He's very responsive. So I reached out to him and I said, you know, would you be willing to take me on? I want 1 year. My commitment is 1 year at the moment. And in that 1 year, what I told him is, you know, I have 2 goals. I want to obviously train as hard as I can to achieve what I might still be able to yet achieve. But I also told him I want to learn as much as I can from him about what he knows and how he's learned to be a great coach, as well as, you know, what he learned when he was an athlete. So that's it. The quest has begun, and we're
Mr.
kicking
McGee
things off this week.
Mr. McGee is now your coach. Very cool.
Did you just call him Mr. McGee?
Yeah, that's his name.
I don't think anyone calls him that, though.
Coach
Isn't there
McGee.
a show called Mr. McGee or something like that? So we call him Barry. Everyone calls him Barry. So Barry is my new coach and will be for the next year. You know, if not more, we'll see. But very excited, and we'll keep you updated on just kind of what we're gaining and gleaning as we embark on this relationship.
Well, I have something that's kind of exciting that I've found to work for me. And some of you know that we just recently went camping and we did a blog post on it because we've been camping and running for 20 plus years. And then we also reached out to some other bloggers, experts to help fill out some of the gaps. But one of the things that I did for the first time on this camping trip, because Zach suggested it to me, was use a basketball.
Wait, hang on. I suggested it many times saying, hey, we should get a basketball. And Andy kept saying, why do we want to buy a basketball?
Yeah, we have like nice foam rollers and stuff.
She just kept saying this to me. Why do we need a basketball? And I just kept
orbs.
saying, I want to buy it.
We have all kinds of great equipment, but he wanted us to get a basketball. So sure enough, we have this basketball. And on my camping trip, I guess my main complaint during camping is probably my aching body. And I think that's probably the case for many, I'm guessing, if you're training while you're camping. Anyway, this basketball tip is from Jay Dishery, and it's brilliant.
Jay Dishery in Running Rewired.
Yes. And you lay on the basketball. You find a spot. You're not rolling. You lay on the basketball, and you hold it, and you give it like 3 deep breaths at least. And it hurts. And it like opens up like all those sticky places in your ribs, and it's great. It's like traction for your back. So anyway, I recommend it. If you want more tips, go and find that blog post. You can go to AtoZrunning.com search blog. You'll see it right there. So
that's good stuff.
Yeah. And fun fact, our guest Kaylin Russeau, after this episode, she like texted me and she's like, "Have you read this book, Running Rewired?" Which is like Zach's favorite book on the planet.
Bring it up in the episode?
We might have. I don't know, but she sent me a text with that, and I was like, "Oh yeah." So she's all about it too. But in this week's episode, we talked to Kaylin Russeau Fitness, and we talk about strengthening the core, glute, hips, movement patterns, stability, and it's like super practical. This is like one you're going to want to like archive and save.
Yes, and it's going to be difficult. And you know, we have to just apologize right now. It's hard to glean very specific physical movements from audio only. So you're going to listen to Kaylin talk about how to do a certain exercise and drill.
We're going to link
you
to
might
some stuff,
need to
though.
listen to it over again. Yeah, we're going to provide you more resources. But this is the kind of episode where you want to like save it somewhere so that you can just try to listen to it a few times and figure out exactly what we're trying to accomplish.
And something really cool that Kaylin has offered all of you as our listeners is to take one of her Core for Runner courses. It's one class that you get to try out for free. You can sign up on AtoZrunning.com/episode 44.
Yeah, and this you got to take this seriously. You got to take Kaylin seriously because she knows this craft from multiple different directions, and that's important because here is an elite runner, you know, she's a highly successful runner herself who can tackle the concept of what a runner needs, but also has been studied in sports strength and stability, and she's got so much to share. So this is going to be great.
We're excited to have her on, but first we're going to talk about the world of running.
All right, first up, I'm just going to mention this resource because it's always helpful to see, you know, what is going on all over the place. We got a lot of running results. We're not going to try to go into too much detail here. So check out the links if you want to read it all. But worldathletics.org is always the kind of the source for what's happening around the globe. And they published like a weekend recap because there's just, you know, there's more stuff happening now, which is great. And that weekend recap included a couple really outstanding performances I just want to mention. First, Gemma Reekie from Great Britain ran 1:59 over her training partner, Laura Muir, in 1:59 in the 800 meters and beat her by 0.02 of a second.
That's amazing.
Very exciting, no doubt. And so they went first, second in the race too, which is just great.
And of course, we're not surprised about Donovan Brazier showing up. We're just not surprised because he just keeps doing that. He ran 1:43.84 in his 800 opener.
Which is, you know, a great time. Donovan's run quite a bit faster than that, which people always say things like, oh, you know, but it's a second and a half off his PR. Well, yeah, it is, but who runs their PR in their season opener? Well, some people do, but Donovan ran fast, and I think it's actually the first person to run under 1:45 yet this year.
So in a separate meet than the one that Donovan was at, there was the Bowerman Track Club
putting on their own team's meet.
It's been
again.
So entertaining. I just want to thank the Bowerman Track Club for all this entertainment.
Right?
So Colleen Quigley, Elise Cranny, Krista Schweitzer, and Shelby Houlihan set the women's world record in the 4x1500 meter relay. And they ran 16:27 to break the old record, which was 16:33.
Set by Kenya 6 years ago.
That's 6 seconds, actually almost 7 seconds.
Yeah, like
faster.
a second and a half a person, which is solid. So for those of you who are trying to figure out numbers in your head right now, okay, we're talking about 4x1500, 16:27. So they averaged like 4:07 a person, right?
Just under that,
Just under that, which, by the way, is like a world qualifying time by itself. So each one of them ran like, you know, professional caliber time. Of course, it's a world record. But 4:07 in the 1500 is roughly equivalent to about a 4:24 mile.
So fast.
So
and these girls are all on the same team. So like Shannon Rowberry, like there's other people that are really fast too, and these ladies are all part of the same team.
Whoa.
So exciting. And they could run even faster because if you were to like pull all their best times or PRs, I mean, you'd get like 16:04.
Yeah, they said if you pooled their PRs, it's like a 4:01 average. But you know, some of these women, like one of them is like an American record. You know, it's just two of them are American record holders. So yeah, they're the best of the best, and that's just
exciting to see them doing this.
So lots of results there to share. There's obviously more. We're just going to put links so you can really see the details if you want to see the details. Just a couple of other things because, you know, there's always stuff in the world of running beyond the actual results. Runner's World published their best stuff of 2020, which is always a decent article because you can just see what are the kinds of things that are coming out. And one thing that's interesting to us, because we love Normatec, which is that inflatable recovery pants stuff, which is wonderful, feels glorious. I'm still not sure. Jury's out on how effective it is for recovery.
I feel like it makes a difference.
But it does. It does make a difference, or they wouldn't have put so much money into developing them. But Normatec's expensive. It's not really something you buy for your house. But there's a competitor now. So Rapid Reboot Recovery System now rivals Normatec for the same kind of stuff, but just a little bit less pricey, which, means that we might see some more options in this kind of stuff, which is great. And plenty more equipment there. Oh, and one other thing. This one also came on Runner's World's dashboard. Tracksmith, which is a running company. It's like an apparel company out of Boston. I've always kind of had slight bit of beef with Tracksmith because I just don't think their stuff looks great. But of course, I have found out other people disagree with me, so they do like the way their stuff looks. So
Zach considers himself to be a fashionista.
No,
so
I am not a fashionista.
He's just like putting it all out there.
But I don't. This is the thing. So with me in fashion, I've never understood why people go back to old fashions. Like in my mind, it's like
I like
if
retro.
It's an old fashion.
We disagree on these things.
Yes, obviously. Well, here's the thing that Tracksmith just did with their latest lineup. They say that it's like optimized for or it's like friendly for swimming. They're running clothes for swimming.
Yeah,
Pause for dramatic effect here. First of all, if you optimize something for swimming, we have to assume you can't also be optimizing it for running. Like they can't. They're not the same thing. One of them's underwater. One of them you want to stay like light and dry.
Tracksmith sends something to Zach so he can figure out
Don't
if it's
send stuff
good
to me. I don't know if I would
for
wear it. Okay, so here's the thing though that the editor said who had tried it out. She said that the fabric is a little thicker than a swimsuit, is what she said, and that worries
too thick.
me. Yep, that worries me. So I'm just commenting because I saw the article and it struck me as odd that they would have swim-friendly running apparel, but. Try it out yourself if you would really, truly like to know.
So for more concrete, useful information, we will have Kaylin Russeau on the podcast coming up after this.
So in the intro, we already started sharing a little bit about Kaylin, but before we get her on here with the interview, we do have a few more details about her that you should know.
Yeah, so Kaylin Russeau, we know her from running together, an elite Playmakers group, and she's a speedster. I mean, she's run super fast times. She's run the 800 in 2:13, 1500 in 4:28. So she's really fast. She's run a under 3-hour marathon too. So she has range, but she is the owner at Kaylin Russeau Fitness. So she has Shred Shed and Shred Shed Online, Core for runners, all kinds of products. You'll have to check out her website, which I will link to. It's KaylinRusseauFitness.com. But we are excited to have her on because she is a runner, but also is really into the mechanics and functional movement and strength that is necessary for runners to stay injury free and to thrive.
One of the best parts about hearing Kaylin's ideas here, as she's going to break down for you just great ways to approach strength and stability. One of the best things about it, and we call her a couple of times in the episode the fitness artist, and she is. But because she understands running so well, and because she understands strength and mobility so well, she doesn't just like look up a series of exercises that are good exercises to strengthen certain muscle groups. She looks at the concepts of how to strengthen and mobilize, and she looks at what a runner needs, and she just makes it this work of art.
And
it's
that's
just
why
wonderful.
Strength is an art and a science.
That it is. So you got to hear this conversation with Kaylin about strength and mobility.
Hi, Kaylin. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, guys.
So this is actually Kaylin's second time on the podcast because she had a short little snippet in another one of our episodes, but we've been wanting to get her on. We were hoping to do it in person because Kaylin and her husband, Alex, are friends of ours.
Yeah, brief backstory here. We know the Russos because at first it was rivalry in college, and I was trying really hard to beat up on Alex in the steeplechase unsuccessfully for a period of time there. And so the rivalries tend to be, in my experience, when you can maintain the contact when the rivalry ends. it's a great way to start a relationship.
A friendship, yeah.
It
So
is.
we all ran for Playmakers for a brief time.
Yep.
That was really fun. So Kaylin, tell our audience about your relationship with running.
Well, my sister Jennifer, she was 3 years older than me. She was always super fast and a really great runner. And as that annoying little sister, I was like, ooh, I want to try this sport out too. I just followed her footsteps. And from there, we run a team together. She's a senior. I was a freshman in high school. And that was a really special year to be able to, be on a team with your sister. And we did some great things as a high school team. It was like 3 pairs of sisters on a team, which was pretty cool. Yeah, it was crazy.
Sister power.
Sister power, yeah. And we were all, a lot of them were all top 7. So it was like 3 sets of sisters and then one, other person.
Did that person ever feel left out? That's great.
I think they did. But overall, running has been a really good experience. I love how it makes you feel, the competition, and, even on your easy days, just being with nature. It's really awesome. Mm-hmm. And then I also found Alex out of it too. So found my husband through running.
That's a bonus.
Yeah, we hear that.
Yeah. So now you're a runner still, but you also are in the profession of fitness. And so that's why we have Kaylin on today. And you heard us talk about her in the bio that we had for her. But we want to talk a little bit, dig deep into the foundation of running, which is mobility and strength. So Kaylin, why is functional movement so important for runners?
Well, the first thing is to prevent injuries. That's number 1. I do have a few key points for you guys, but in majority of cases, injuries do occur due to limited range of motion and muscular imbalances. And those occur throughout the body that affect the stability of a joint. So we need to create a really strong structure to handle the volume of the miles and to stay healthy. So that's a huge point there. And something else to consider is that running comes with a lot of forces on the body, especially our low back takes a beating, our knees, our hips, pretty much all the joints in the body take a beating. And our bodies, you ever hear the saying where it's your body takes 2.5 to 3 times your body weight with every single stride, which is crazy. And just to put that into perspective, if you take a runner that's 155 pounds and you do 2.5 their body weight, which is 230, and then you add those together, and that's 387 pounds loaded on a single leg.
Wow. Whoa. Yeah.
It's a lot of force.
Yeah, it's a lot of force.
This is mind-blowing. So it just shows you that running, it's if you're not strong, you can have a lot of injuries, and running really affects every muscle, tendon, bone with a large amount of force. So it's so important to control and to try to train those forces that our body takes.
Kaylin, if I can throw something out there, so I'm saying this not because I agree with this school of thought, but it certainly has been out there for a long time that for runners, the best thing about our sport is that you do all of the strengthening that you need to do by doing the sport of running. So many will say just by going out and running, you're strengthening the things that need to be strengthened. You don't really need to do anything else. And obviously, we disagree with that, or we wouldn't be talking about this right now.
Yep.
But what do you miss when you're running? You certainly are strengthening the things you need, but what are you missing if you don't do anything else?
It is a valid point, because I definitely I have some older school runners that ran in like the 60s and 70s, and like, oh, I don't need strength training, and sometimes they do just fine. But if you think about where could they have been if they did the strength training and they worked on the mobility and the foam rolling and the core training, so I know it's an interesting concept, just because they are doing well, and if they're not getting injured, then sometimes they don't see that as a problem. So
I think that's kind of like a unicorn thing, though. I think most people do get injured with weakness. I guess maybe I'd like to think that because I'm someone who struggled with weakness, and I'm not the unicorn. So I envy those people that can go out and go for forever and ever and do ultras and not really think about all the little things. But I have found that most people that we talk to and we've interacted with really could utilize this foundation of running. So I'm really glad that we're going to talk more about that today.
So then when when someone does engage with the right kinds of things, they know they need to do the work with strength and mobility, what kinds of mistakes do they still potentially make? Or what are some of the common mistakes, whether it's runners or otherwise, that we make when we're trying to do these kinds of things?
So I would say the first thing that tends to happen is they don't see it as a priority, I guess. That's the first thing. And sort of like we were talking about the old school runners, they just don't really see how it would be something that they need to make a priority. And then it can go the complete opposite spectrum of doing too much in one session and not, it's just not consistent. They do like this one huge effort and then they it's almost like the New Year's resolutioners is what I always compare it to. They have these big goals and, they go to the gym and they do like 2 hours of exercise and, that's not always realistic for a new person, so even with our running, we want to make sure in our strength training, we need to make sure that it's just like small chunks. And there's a book, I don't know if you guys have read it, but it's MEB for Mortals. And what the thing that I learned from that is, and you can shorten your run maybe by like 5 minutes and maybe take some extra time to do your drills and maybe do some strength training to sort of fine tune those areas and the things that people neglect by doing just like shorter segments, make it consistent.
That's a great tip. I talked to someone, I don't know exactly when this was now, but I asked the question, how much time do you have available for running every day, when we were just talking about kind of setting up a training schedule. And the response was basically like, as much time as I want. And my answer was that can't possibly be true. You have other things in life that you have to do. But it brought me to the realization as I was talking with him that it's really a valuable thing to look at the amount of time I have available and actually like schedule. So I'm going to spend 90 minutes today, but I'm only running an hour. And so now I have the other 30 minutes scheduled and I can use that for before and after, what I need to do extra. So even that tip from Meb is, if you don't have the time to fit it in, then cut the run a little bit shorter and use that time. That's good advice.
And utilizing a trainer or a program or a workout session with someone like Kaylin that's going to commit you to doing it on a regular basis because you're held accountable.
Oh yes,
that's
definitely. Because you were talking, Steve. Just like not for a lot of people, they don't make time for it or see it as a priority. But really, like scheduling a class, meeting up with a friend, and that, like you said, will increase that accountability for sure.
Mm-hmm. And make it more fun.
Yeah, it makes it way more fun. By yourself, it's not as fun.
Yeah, it's more of a chore when it's just you and kids crawling on top of you.
Well,
in that case.
then it becomes an activity.
I guess for them.
So we have these 4 areas that we've outlined for our listeners as kind of some key focus areas. But without even trying to touch on that at the moment, Kaylin, just in general, what kind of areas of weakness do you feel like most runners tend to see? Or in your practice, what kinds of areas of weakness do you see in the clients you work with?
So the first one I would say is going to be the posterior chain. A lot of times the glutes, they can have a hard time being activated, and sometimes it's due to the hip flexors being too tight. And you got to figure a lot of people they're working, they're seated all day long, and that causes really tight hip flexors and it makes that glute almost dormant. So there's the term broken butt or dormant glute. And to improve this, we have to make sure that we choose exercises that strengthen, stabilize, recruit our muscles to work together, so then we can achieve the movement to get that muscle to turn back on and to fire properly. Mm-hmm. So it's really a beautiful system, but if they're out of whack, then it makes it a lot harder to get things to work properly. So definitely glutes. We work a lot on glutes. We do So along with the glutes, hip girdle, we do a lot of mobility and strengthening with band routines.
Well, and you mentioned, just recruitment. So the amount of recruitment that you need, as well as recruitment in the right sequence, in a sense. And that's, we started off the conversation just talking about functional movement, and Jay DeSherry's work on that has been informative for us. But that's what it's really all about. If for my glutes to work functionally, they need to be able to fire in certain ways and certain amounts and such. And so that's good. So you were saying then resistance bands and some work with just providing motion with resistance is a key factor there.
Oh yeah, definitely for the mobility and then just overall strength. And even when you're doing like the Myrtle, your other hip's burning from like stabilizing your body.
Yep.
So I don't know if you guys notice that when you're doing that, but
Yep. Very true.
A lot of times I'll notice Kaylin with like planks, like my arms, because I'm a little weaker at her. Like, okay, I can do these planks, but my arms are getting tired. Like, I don't know. So yeah, like you were saying, like you are using your full body in these kinds of movements. You're using other parts that you didn't even know. And when you were saying like muscle recruitment working together, like it's beautiful how it works when you're firing and using all of the muscles that you need in order to run properly and live like really functionally throughout your life, not being in pain, not having lower back pain. Yeah, that's great.
So what was other areas of weakness?
So a lot of it's going to be our stability. So balance is hard for a lot of in the beginning of a training program, but it's really important to make that stability dynamic since running itself is dynamic. So starting out, people are wobbling all over the place, and anytime that we're wobbling, especially because our body works in 3 planes of motion, we need to really make sure that those areas are strong so then we can prevent those injuries. So less wobble, the better.
Yeah. So talk about those 3 planes of motion.
What are they? I always forget the names of the 3 planes of motion.
Are you guys familiar with the lunge matrix?
Yes, we are.
Yes. Okay. So there is a physical therapist. He's actually out of Adrian, Michigan. His name is Dr. Gary Gray. And the lunge matrix, and pretty much a matrix in general, is about moving in the sagittal plane, the frontal plane. So sagittal is forward, back, and your frontal is side to side. And then your transverse plane is going to be more rotational. So Gary Gray, he pretty much created all these matrices, but the lunge matrix is used by coaches and athletes all over the world. The benefits of the lunge matrix is not only strengthening our bodies in all planes of motion, but you're working on the tissue health of the hip joint. Yeah,
that's huge.
Zach's like so happy right now.
I'm so excited.
He's so excited because he just learned something nerdy. So thank you, Kaylin.
You're welcome.
I'm excited as well. But I just saw him light up. You guys can't see him at home, like he's getting excited about it. And there was one other one, right? Or 2 other ones.
The last one I listed is the overall range of motion of runners. A lot of times it's pretty poor. And so I like to, I'm going to just put it out there, but thoracic and lumbar mobility, if that area is limited, it can really cause us to be really stiff through our trunk. And that can affect many other areas in the body. So it can affect your arm swing. Also, it can cause some low back pain. So we do a lot of, it's called the best stretch ever, or it's the twisted warrior in yoga. Yeah. But you rotate and you work on that thoracic mobility as you reach back. And so you're really trying to work on that mobility, flexion, and the extension of the spine. You can use the cat-cow, which is also common in yoga practice. And that's a great way to really work on the mobility in that direction. So we work a lot with that. And I personally, we learned through experience as well. So I had a really, really stiff back, especially the thoracic spine. But my coach always told me that it looked like I was carrying a TV because my arms went out and I was just so stiff in my trunk. So when I went to therapy, they were like, oh, it was my feet at the time, but they're like, oh, we have some other areas we got to work on. So,
right.
We worked on that, and I feel like my form is a lot more fluid because my trunk is relaxed. So that's an area that I wanted to touch on as well.
That's huge. So I gotta back us up a little bit because you've just thrown in all these golden nuggets, these little diamonds here. So we're talking about posterior chain for a little bit, and you mentioned glutes and especially activation and strengthening and recruitment, and so some resistance band things. I want to come back to that. But then you also mentioned planes of motion, and the lunge matrix is a very effective way to address something like that because it's so simple too. Which is a large part of why we tend to recommend that we follow Jay Johnson's route of everyone should probably do the lunge matrix before running every day. That's not a bad just cover everything if you can kind of thing. And then talking about the lumbar and thoracic mobility, and so you gave us the twisted warrior stretch, which you see that everywhere, and there's no surprise why, because it is really effective. And then the cat-cow is another way to address some of the mobility issues, especially further down in the lumbar area. So what else, I guess, is my next question. Like, what are the other effective ways that we can work on strengthening and mobilizing some of these key areas. And I did mention earlier, we kind of laid out 4 of them for our audience previously, and you've touched on 2 or 3 of them already. What about like foot and ankle, or what about, is there anything else with hips? You did mention Myrtle, and I don't know if our audience is familiar with that, so we're definitely going to provide a link to the Myrtle routine as well. Yep. But anything else? What else can you share?
I can give you some examples. So we did talk about the posterior chain and maybe some exercise examples. So the good morning is a really good one because it's a dynamic movement. So we talked about that in our balance. We're dynamic. We don't want to stretch all day. We want to be functional. So without mobility and stability, we need to make sure that we're runnable, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So good mornings are great because as you go down into a good morning, you're lengthening the tissue, but then you're activating the hamstrings and the glutes to achieve that movement, and you're also working on stretching the hip flexors as you come forward. So that's a great example of posterior activation, but then you're lengthening, through the posterior side of your body, then also the anterior side of your body.
Very nice. So
that'd be an example of that. And if you wanted to get into some balance, and we talked about the recruitment of the muscles, I was talking about dormant booty, and trying to figure out movement patterns. And sometimes when you work with a trainer, they're like, "Oh, your glutes aren't working. Let's do like a lot of I guess when it be glutes when you do squats, your quads, your glutes are working, and a lot of trainers would be like, okay, just keep doing squats, it will work eventually, but that's not what we want. We actually want to try to get a pattern going so then we can get the glute to fire. So you're getting everything to work together through the kinetic chain in order to get things moving properly. So single leg deadlift, that's what I was trying to go with. So single leg deadlift, you can do cone reaches. So you're doing the movement pattern pretty much of a good morning. I like to put little cones out. So if you're on your mat, you have a cone on the right, a cone on your left, and then cone in the middle. And you take your foot and you create a diamond. And then you try to look at the middle cone, but you're adding some reaches. So just adding those reaches, you're challenging your balance, you're challenging your core, and you're training your hip stability. So everything's working together. And again, I say beautiful, like it is beautiful. It's really cool. I think it's so cool. So
should we call you the fitness artist? So in addition to being scientific, right? You're a fitness artist.
I'm like this hippie that just loves it. It's awesome. But then again, with the single leg deadlift, it's probably my favorite exercise, but you're also strengthening your core. You can add an unstable surface. Like there's so much that you can do to challenge yourself. And I had a client tell me recently, because we had like weight transfers. So then in the single leg deadlift, you're having the weight and you bring it to your chest and then you bring it overhead, and she's like, I feel so BA like doing this, like I feel amazing, like I can do that without falling over, so
that's really a big accomplishment. So to whoever that client is, I'm applauding you right now on air.
Yeah, for sure. So and let me see some other examples. So another thing with planes of motion, you don't just train your legs, you're training everything. So you're actually training your core, and your core, the muscles that surround it, you want to think of it like a suit of armor, and your goal is to protect everything in there. So if you get a force from any direction, your core can handle it. And so we train through anti-extension, which is an example of the sagittal plane. And you're also training anti-rotation, which is also going to be a transverse plane, and then also some exercise in the frontal plane. So wordy, I'm sorry. But your anti-extension, you can think of like ab rollouts, but you have to maintain a really stable spine, because if you don't, then you're going to hurt your low back. So you have to be able to stabilize, brace your core before you do like a rollout, or grab an exercise ball, do a plank on an exercise ball, create a very stable core. You can write your name with your arms, but when you do that, your hips are stable, and having a wide base with the feet is important. So be careful. And then also, so that's anti-extension, and then working with rotation, I always think of doing like a plank row. So if you're on the ground doing a plank, you would have your hands underneath your shoulders, and then while putting a foam roller on your mid back, you would bring up the arm, and you could do this without weights. You just do it body weight, and then keeping the hips nice and stable, and then doing the other side. So those are great. And then same with bird dog. Like you're pretty much just trying to keep the core as tight as you can as you do different drivers. So when you do the frontal, this is one I just did recently, but it's just a bird dog. So you have the opposite arm and leg, and instead of reaching out, you're actually holding your arm and leg out, and you're moving your arm out to the side and also the leg out to the side, and then you're going to bring it back to center. And if you have a foam roll on your back, I mean, it's really cool to connect with your core, because you can feel that's pretty much what the foam roller does on the bent back, and put a water bottle cone, and you're just getting feedback, because if it falls, then you're not stabilizing very well. But yeah, those are some examples for the posterior chain and the core. Dead bugs. Do you guys do dead bugs?
Not by that name.
No? Okay. So a dead bug is another anti-extension exercise. So you're going to it's a weird name, but you lay on your back and you put your hands up and your knees up, and your goal is to keep your low back glued to the ground. And you're going to reach out your right arm and your left leg while maintaining a neutral spine. And then you bring your arm and leg up, and then you do the other side. And there's so many variations of this exercise. You can put an exercise ball in between your arm and leg and do the same thing, but again, you're getting feedback. So you're pressing into the ball with your arm and leg as you bring your arm and leg and extend them. So dead bugs are fantastic.
Dead bug is bird dog upside down.
Yes. That's exactly what it is.
Oh, nice.
And it kind of like reverse alliterates with the words, bird dog, dead bug. So it's, they're connected in many ways.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a really great one.
I'm noticing a trend, and I don't want to cut you off, so if you have more to share, let's definitely come back to that. I'm noticing a trend where we're really talking about you're looking at movements embedded in a focus area. So I think about what's the area that I really need to work on stabilizing or strengthening, and how can I move in ways that essentially risk destabilizing it. So I have to maintain that stability throughout the entire motion. And that's where that creativity comes in. Andy mentioned the fitness artist. We're going to call you Kaylin the fitness artist.
I like it.
and that's really a lot of what you're talking about. Correct me if I'm wrong, though.
No, that's spot on. And especially depends what phase the athlete is in. So if they're a beginner, I'm going to choose a very basic movement. Let's make sure that they're doing the motion properly. They have the foundation down. And then all of a sudden, as they start getting a little bit more advanced, I can add little tweaks, like, okay, let's add a weight, or let's add an exercise ball, things like that to get them more challenged. So
that's a great example of easing gradually into it. You mentioned earlier, the New Year's resolution strength and mobilizer who says, I'm going to, every day I'm going to spend time. And, so we got to ease into it. That's a good example. You can add more resistance over time, or you can destabilize in more ways, add weight. I appreciate that. So
Kaylin, I'm going to just throw this at you. What is something that you do every day before you run? What's something that you would do?
Okay, well, I would say this has been very consistent lately, and I've also been healthy for a long time, which I'm very thankful for. But I would say the things that I do is I will do a very quick foam rolling session just to sort of warm up my body and just get blood flowing a little bit. Nothing crazy, almost just like a little buff, just warm up. And then I'll do probably 3 good mornings. I'll do 3 single leg good mornings. And then I will do the lunge matrix, but I only do, I would say only do reverse lunge, side lunge, and then I just stick it with that. And then before I run, I do a few form drills, not for very long, but just to get my body ready to run. So I'll do some A skips, do some B skips. I do shuffles because that frontal plane of motion is so important to make sure you're warmed up in. And then I'm pretty much ready to go. So.
Thanks for sharing that.
And that's a great example, too, of very targeted things, but you don't have to spend a lot of time doing this huge, routine. That's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think of it as a really daunting concept when we talk about, you should be doing something before you run to get your body ready to run. And there's so many things you can do, and that's true, but you don't have to do tons and tons of things.
Or do them all lots of times. Like she's
Yeah,
saying
you don't
you're
have to
doing
do 20
3.
good mornings.
Right.
You can do 3. You know, that's that's good.
Just to work on the muscle activation is so key. But I mean, I think we all learn and we continue to learn. But when I did have my injuries, I had plantar fasciitis for a year, and then it took me so long to get back, and it was such a difficult thing. And you wanted to be healthy so bad that I think I did everything. Like it took me forever to get warmed up. And I think something I learned now is just, okay, I need a balance. I need a posterior exercise. I also want to get a little bit of quad activation. And, you're using your core through all these things, so that's something that I really focus on. But just getting your feet ready, too, is so important, So with the history of plantar, I'm a little cautious on that, but it hasn't came back.
What do you do for ankle and foot?
So I would say for foot, the single leg deadlifts would be a good one to focus on. As far as ankle, I would say, again, the single leg exercises do help a lot with that. And then as far as so this is another part of the ankle, but when you do your drills, I always focus on keeping my toe up. So I feel like that helps strengthen the peroneal group of your shin muscles. So just little preventative things you can do. And so drills are so cool too, because you're working on so many things like tissue length as you do a B-skip and the quickness, and there's so much to it.
Well, thank you, Kaylin. Before we say goodnight, though, I do want people to know about this project that you're doing. I know it's not running related, but Hank the Camper is pretty cool. I follow Hank on Instagram.
Oh,
and
come on.
I'm just really curious about how this is unraveling for you and what motivated you to do it.
Is Alex there? Can he jump on?
Alex, come here.
Alex, come on here.
What's that?
Kaylin and Alex are
What's up, Alex?
super adventurous, fun friends of ours, and we just had this awesome, riveting conversation with Kaylin about strength and mobility. But now we want to talk about Hank just a little bit. So we brought on Alex. He came over. So, Alex, tell us about Hank. What brought this project along?
Yeah, so, quarantine brings out lots of weird things in people, but we're like, what better place to be quarantined than in a van? So we bought ourselves a van, and now we hope to travel along remotely. I've been working from home, too, so maybe I can do a little remote work in the van. I don't know. It's just an exciting project that we're working on and making it as homey as possible. So that's literally where I was just at, working on this thing. It consumes me entirely.
That's great.
That's what Kaylin was saying, that the passion that you have for running, you can translate that same kind of focus to your projects that you do.
Hank.
Absolutely. Yeah. So and Hank is the previous owner's name. So that's where the van name came from.
Oh, that's
There you go.
sentimental.
Yeah.
You've embedded the essence of Hank into the camper.
Absolutely.
Hank.
Well, that's exciting. So
Hey, is that a height shirt that I see there?
It is.
We're
It's
throwing
nice.
back right there.
Yeah, going back. Yep.
All right.
Let's go for a night run.
Good stuff, man.
Well, thank you so much, you guys. We hope to connect soon. We wish we could do this in person, but maybe you can bring Hank up to Michigan and we can hang out together.
Sounds awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks again.
Every time I'm with Kaylin, I feel like I learn something, and this was full of things that I am learning and going to be applying. So thank you so much, Kaylin, for sharing all of this with us and with our audience.
And every time I'm with Alex, I feel like I laugh at something. Generally just good fun and funny conversations, and of course
And Hank.
Alex made that guest appearance
He
and I
did.
had more to laugh about, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So they just recently, after this podcast was recorded, they took Hank. I mean, it was only 5 weeks. He worked day and night to make this happen, but 5 weeks, he totally renovated this camper van, and they took it to the lakeshore of Michigan and had a grand old time. So yeah.
That's wonderful. So the big thing, if I could just say, the big takeaway for me as I'm listening to Kaylin talk through these things is if we want to truly be the most successful we can be in running healthily and enjoying the sport, just feeling good and confident in the sport. And a lot of that comes from knowing that the work we're doing won't hurt us, right? Mm-hmm. Like I can train hard and confidently knowing that I can stay healthy to as best a degree as a person can know that. A lot of that comes from understanding how and why and where and when I need to strengthen my body. And so as I'm listening to Kaylin, this isn't the kind of stuff, this isn't beyond reach. You don't have to talk to an expert to figure out what you need to do. I mean, it's great to work with physical therapists. We work with Adam day and night because we need him. But we can learn this kind of stuff so that we can understand how to make ourselves better. And that's what I was getting from as I'm hearing Kaylin talk. It's complicated things. These aren't necessarily simple things, but they're learnable things. And I want to encourage you all as our audience to do what you can do to continue to learn more about how you can be the best possible runner. Like, yes, we want a coach. Yes, we want a physical therapist, all those kinds of people. But how much do you know about how to train and how to train well to accomplish your goals? How much do you know about strengthening and mobilizing effectively to be healthy and strong?
In this Core for Runners, I'm so excited that she offered this. So make sure you go to AtoZrunning.com/episode 44 and sign up for that free class so you can check it out. See if it's something that you want to invest in as part of your running routine. And Kaylin's a great person to know, great person to learn from, and a very inspirational person altogether.